So over a year ago, I went to a dealer-only auction and I had over 20 cars to check out in under 1 hour. I wasn't able to do the right checks because of that small amount of time that I had, so I ended up buying a lemon and losing a lot of money. From that situation, I came up with my own system that has allowed me to never buy another lemon from any of these dealer auctions. Now I want to give you that system in a step-by-step inspection guide that you can knock out in under 5 minutes per car. Then at the end, I'll also be letting you in on a crucial mistake most dealers make that cause them to overspend at the auction. Let's get into it. What's up? My name is Jamal from Flipping University. In this channel, I help people build a scalable business flipping cars so you can build a life of freedom doing things that you really want to do. So before anything else, let's say you went to the car auction and you ended up buying a car that you thought had no problems, when in reality, you actually just didn't have the right tools to check those problems before you ended up getting it home. That's the last thing that you want. So to cover that, let's talk about the tools you're gonna need to bring first and foremost. The first one is an OBD scanner. This is the number one thing that you really cannot forget. For me, I wouldn't even buy a car if I wasn't able to actually check out what the codes of the car had. So you absolutely need to have this, and the one that I would suggest having would be the Blue Driver OBD scanner. I would suggest this one primarily for two different reasons. The first reason is that there's actually a lot of auctions that don't want you to bring an OBD scanner the actual day that the car is going to be going through the bidding lanes. So being able to have a device this small that you can just pop into your pocket and be able to just pop into the cars that same day to check out the cars is really helpful. And realistically, from what I've seen, this is the best one that you can have as a scanner that can check out the most things in a car while still being a really small compact thing like this. There are other ones out there, of course, but I would highly suggest this one. And no, they're not sponsoring me to say that or anything like that. I just really like the scanner myself. The next ones will be a flashlight, some type of rag or microfiber cloth. And as an optional thing, I would also say you could bring a jumper pack as well to jump the car. We're gonna get into exactly how you're gonna be using all these things later on in the video, but that's the things that you should be bringing first and foremost. So the next thing is, when you go to the auction, there could be 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 cars all at that same auction. So if you only have about an hour to check out the cars before bidding starts, how can you make sure that you're checking out the right cars that you will actually want to bid for? The first thing that I would really suggest doing would be actually making a run list of the cars that you want to be able to see at the auction. So you want to make sure that when you get there and you have that specific amount of time to check out the cars, you already have the cars in mind that you want to be able to see. When it comes to dealer auctions, they could have different ways that they're saying different things, but the main thing is that they're going to have run numbers and lane numbers. Let's say for this auction that I like to go to around me, it will have a lane letter from A all the way down to like E, and then there'll be a run number going from 1 all the way to like 200 or so. And how it works is each lane will have different run numbers going through them when the actual auction bidding starts. And let's say run number 1 will be the first one to go up, and let's say run number 200 will be one of the last ones to go through. So if you have an auction that's starting at around 9 o'clock, that car that has a run number of like 200 might not be showing up to the auction to actually be bidded on up until like 12 o'clock potentially. But the other thing is to try to check out the cars that have the lowest run numbers as the first cars that you want to check, especially if you don't have that much time. Let's say if you only have like an hour to check out 20 plus cars. Just because you don't want it to be where you're checking out cars that have a run number of like 150 or something that are going to be showing up hours later, and then you end up missing out on cars that have a run number of 5 or so. That's going to be one of the first cars to be bidded on. And as a quick thing, just talking about the mentality that you have to have as you're checking out these cars, the whole thing, to keep it short and sweet, is you want to be quick and efficient. You can't be taking as long as you would take if you're going to be checking out a car through private sale. If you do that with every single car, there's no way you're going to be able to check out everything in time. But you want to hit the main things that will actually be able to cover yourself to make sure that you're not buying some lemon of a car yourself, and do that as fast as possible. And to help with this, I would also suggest bringing some type of notepad, or if you want to just have the notes on your phone and the app, or even notes on the auction site or the auction app, that's also helpful too. Just so you could jot down the things that you're keeping tabs on for the cars you're going to be bidding on. Now, one thing I want you to understand is realistically, most dealers are savage. They'll hide the normal signs that would easily be able to show if that car car was a lemon or not. So really it's up to you to check the things that they might be trying to hide so they can get more money themselves. So make sure you take notes, because this is all the things that you need to make sure you inspect. So the first thing I would usually do is take a very quick walk around the car just to see what the condition of the car is like. Generally speaking, you want to try to sell cars that's at least in good condition. So you have to think right away, if it's not in good condition right now, what will you have to do to get it to being in good condition? Regardless if it's doing paint work, detailing, dent repairs, whatever the case may be. Right after that, you want to jump into the car and start it up if you can. If you can't, this is where the jumper pack comes in play. And I'm going to go a little bit more into that in a second, but this is where if you do have a jumper pack, it would also help. Then after that, not only would it just be starting the car, but you also want to quickly rev up the car and possibly even hold the rev for that car just to see if there's any weird sounds that you're hearing. The main thing that you don't want to hear is things like, let's say if the engine is knocking, that could be a big problem that you'll end up having to fix later. Or just how the car is running as well. If it's just running really rough, different things like that. You want to try to hear things like that as well. Then after that, you want to use that scanner that you have and plug it in with the OBD port. And the first thing that I usually check is the I am readiness status. What this is going to do in short is just tell you if the codes have been cleared or not recently. Generally speaking, there's two different ways that another dealer could have just brought that car to the auction and cleared the codes themselves. They could have actually had a scanner like you have and just went to the clear code section and cleared the codes away so that no one else can see it. Or it could end up being where the car just died. And when that happens, when the battery dies, generally speaking, the codes get reset with it as well. So with the I am readiness status, if you check that and you see that there's incomplete monitors that's showing up, this will be the notation of if there's potentially a code that's still pending in the system that hasn't come up yet or not. It's not to say that you just can't go for the car just because of the fact that there's incomplete monitors. You still can if you'd like to, but you should be at least putting that down in your notes as something that could potentially happen rather than just going forward thinking that everything is perfect with the car. So let's say you are going to be still going for this car and you're not just going to cross it off your list even though the codes have been cleared. What you still could do to potentially see around what the codes are that's still stored in the system would be to do something called a mode 6 test. You can do that with this blue driver scanner as well. And to explain it in very short fashion, there's a lot to it, but what it can essentially do is it can take data that is still stored in the system that hasn't went on to doing the full thing of actually setting that check engine light yet by going a little bit deeper and doing specific tests with doing things like potentially checking to see what misfires the engine has done while that car has been running. I will link to another video up on the top just so you can see a little bit more in depth about exactly what you can see and read from the mode 6 data. But that is an extra test that you could do just in case you're still considering that car. Then after that, the best thing would be to do a full system check, especially if you have something like ABS lights coming on or traction control lights coming on. Again, the blue driver scanner can do that. Not every other scanner can, but this will be able to pull in codes from that. It'll also be able to pull in codes like engine codes and different things like that. And of course, that's stuff that you should all try to gauge on and know about before you actually go to pay for the car. Then what I like to do, just to again make things as efficient as possible while I'm just waiting for that scan to come up, because it takes a little bit, I also like to go around the car and check to see what things are working and what things are not. So testing out things like if the windows are working, the AC is working, especially the heat, the radio, things like the sunroof, all that stuff. Just really try to check everything while that test is being completed. And what you want to do is get out the car and check under the hood. The main thing that you're trying to really gauge with a lot of these tests is to see how the engine of the car is and how the transmission of the car is, because that's the two components that you really don't want to go bad and end up having to fix yourself. So one of the quick tests that you can do is check under the engine cap and see if there's any milky residue that's under the engine cap. If there is milky residue like this, then it could potentially go into two different ways actually. It could either be a blown head gasket as one thing, or if you're in an area like I'm in New York where it's cold and certain temperatures and different things like that, it could actually be condensation as well. And if you were out of the auction, then there could be different tests that you could do just to make sure that it's actually condensation instead of a blown head gasket. But in an auction, honestly, you can only do with so many tests. So if it does have that residue there, then just be wary of it because some of them can look very similar. It's not a definite thing that it might be a blown head gasket, but again, you should at least take that as a note if you're going to be bidding on the car. You're also going to check the dipstick and the coolant reservoir to see basically the same thing, just looking to see if there's any signs of having a coolant and oil mixture. That's really what you don't want in the car. Then you're going to check for leaks first around the engine bay, and then you're going to look under the car and see if there's any leaks under there as well. And not to say that it's the end of the world if there's any leaks, but again, this is something that you really should know beforehand rather than after, especially if it's something concerning like coolant leaking from the radiator or something like that that could end up being a potentially big fix. The next main thing would be looking for rust. So rust, especially if you're in an area again like I'm in New York, could be a potential problem that could come up, and really there's a lot of rust on most cars out here, but what you're really looking out for is penetrating rust, and specifically on structural parts of the car. Then after that, you can also do a very quick check on the suspension of the car. You don't have to do this, but it would be nice to just quickly check. What you can do is just go on each corner of the car and just press down with your weight to see how much it kind of bounces back up. If you don't do this here, you could do this on the test drive. And I will say not every single auction technically allows you to do a test drive. A lot of times they just want you to just back up out of the spot and then just go back into it. But for me, I mean, I've seen a lot of cars that have good reverse and everything, but it has a problem if they're just trying to shift through the gears. So what you should at least try to do, if possible, is take it through the first couple of gears, maybe just shifting into second and third, and then actually slam on the brakes as well. And this is also around the time that you can check the suspension to see how the suspension is handling the bumps and different things like that. Now, of course, if you did remember from the beginning of the video, I did also mention I was going to talk about what a common mistake was that a lot of car dealers make when they're going to these auctions and how they end up overspending on cars by thousands of dollars. Before we get into that, if you are someone that's getting into flipping cars yourself and you're trying to kind of have a full-on way to be able to follow when you're going to these auctions, where you can actually see, all right, what car you should go for, what car you shouldn't go for, and how you could find good profitable cars without having a lot of risk with it. I did put together a checklist going over exactly that. You could download it on your phone or you could take it with you and print it out. If you want access to that, just go to the description below. So with the mistake that I see a lot of dealers making is they'll gauge the pricing that they should buy their cars for on completely the wrong thing. They'll mainly look at one of two areas, either the Manheim Market Report or the MMR. This is something that you can quickly and easily pull up if you go into the Manheim app on the phone, and some other apps like ACV Auctions also have that as well. Or they'll even look at the trade-in value of some websites like Kelley Blue Book or Carfax or anything like that. And whatever those values are, as long as they're buying it for that same price, they're good to go. That is not the right thing to do, because this really only shows, first of all, estimates of what cars can go for, and even for things like MMR, it only shows an average of what other dealers are paying for that car. It's not taking into account that whole check that you literally just made right before this with potentially what problems the car has, how much profit you want to make, different things like that. So the best way to do it would be to see how much that car would sell for once it's in good condition, and then subtract the amount of profit that you want to make and the expenses that you have to put into the car, and that ending value will show you the amount that you should be buying the car for. And now, going over all this, a question that might be popping up in your mind is, all right, cool, so we have the car now what do I have to do to actually be able to flip it for profit? Because this is only part of the game. And I actually put together a full video explaining that whole thing of how to flip a car. If you want to see that video, you can click into that there. But besides that, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to be alerted when the next video drops about flipping cars. And until next time, peace.